She looked me dead in the eye and said, "Nobody asked for your opinion, Dad. Just stay out of it." I was sitting at my own dining room table, the one I had refinished with my own hands the summer of 2009, the one I had eaten breakfast at every single morning for 23 years. I looked at my daughter, the woman I had driven to dance recitals and orthodontist appointments and university orientation, and I did not say a word. I picked up my fork, I put it back down, and I made a decision so quietly that no one at that table heard it happen. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me go back to where this really started. I retired in the spring of 2022 after 31 years with the city of Ottawa. Water infrastructure. Not glamorous, not the kind of job you brag about at dinner parties, but it paid well, it had a pension, and it kept this family housed and fed and clothed through recessions and a divorce and a pandemic. I worked because I had to, and then I kept working because I wanted my daughter to have everything I did not. Her name is Chloe. She is 34 years old. She was always a bright girl. Sharp, funny, a little headstrong. I raised her mostly on my own after her mother and I separated when Chloe was 11. We did not have a dramatic falling out, her mother and I. We just became two people who were better off living separately. Chloe stayed with me during the week, with her mother on weekends. We made it work. I made it work. Packed her lunches, went to every parent-teacher interview, taught her how to drive in the empty parking lot behind St. Laurent Shopping Center on Sunday mornings. I was not a perfect father. I want to say that clearly, because I have had a lot of time to think about this, and I know I made mistakes. I let things slide when I should have held the line. I apologized when she was rude to me, because I did not want conflict. I wrote checks when I should have said no. I did this because she was my only child and I loved her, and because after her mother left I felt a guilt I could not quite name, and money and yes became my way of carrying that guilt. That is the honest version. When Chloe was 26, she met a man named Brett at a bar on Elgin Street. He was 31, worked in sales, or said he did. By the time I met him properly, he had already quit 2 jobs and was exploring options, which I learned means watching hockey and ordering DoorDash. He was not a bad person exactly. He was just the kind of man who has always found someone else to absorb the consequences of his choices. Before Chloe, that was his own parents. After they met, it became Chloe. And not long after that, it became me. They moved in together after 8 months, into an apartment I co-signed. I told myself it was just to help them get started. Their son, Tyler, was born in 2020. Beautiful boy. Dark eyes, his mother's laugh. I was at the hospital the morning he arrived, waiting in that bright corridor with terrible coffee and a heart so full I thought it might embarrass me. Becoming a grandfather did something to me that I was not prepared for. It made me soft in a new way. A way that Brett and Chloe, I think, eventually learned to use. By 2021, they were behind on rent. I covered it. By 2022, the same month I retired, they asked if they could move into my house in Gloucester just for a year, Dad, just until we get on our feet. My house was paid off. I had 3 bedrooms. I said yes. That year became 2. Those 2 years became the longest of my life. Let me tell you what life looked like inside my own home. I woke up every morning at 6:30. Old habit. I made coffee and I sat at that dining room table and read the news on my tablet in the quiet, which was the only quiet I would have all day. By 8, Tyler was up. I love that part, I want to be clear, and I would make him eggs or toast, and we would watch cartoons for a bit before Brett emerged from the bedroom sometime around 10:30. He rarely said good morning. He went straight to the fridge, stood in front of it with the door open for what felt like geological periods of time, and then made himself whatever he wanted from groceries I had bought. Chloe worked from home. She had a marketing job, good salary, but the money moved like water through their hands. They had car payments. 2 vehicles, both financed, one of which I was still co-signed on. They had streaming subscriptions I did not watch. They had a storage locker at one of those places on Innes Road, full of furniture from their old apartment that would not fit in my house. And I was paying $65 a month for it without being asked, because the bill came to my email, and I did not want to make a scene. Tyler was in a private Montessori program on the other side of Gloucester, $4,000 a term. I paid it because Chloe said the public option was not good enough, and because Tyler was my grandson and I wanted good things for him, and because by this point I had stopped asking myself whether any of this was reasonable. I bought the groceries. I paid the utilities. My gas bill last February was $340, partially because Brett kept the thermostat at 23 degrees even when I was the only one home. When I mentioned it once, just once, he looked at me like I had said something in a foreign language, and then went back to whatever he was watching on the TV in the living room, my living room, with the volume up. Chloe told me I was being passive-aggressive about the heat. I apologized. My pension was $4,200 a month. By the time I added up what I was spending on this household, groceries, utilities, Tyler's school, the storage locker, the occasional bailout when their account ran short before the end of the month, I was spending roughly $2,800 of it on a family that was not mine to support. I had RRSP savings. I had some investments. I was not destitute. But I had worked 31 years so that I could retire, and instead I had invited a second family into my house and was running it like a hotel that did not charge for rooms. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself this every morning at 6:30, alone with my coffee. The evening it ended began like most evenings. I had made dinner, a pot of chili, cornbread, nothing fancy, but it took me most of the afternoon. Brett came to the table still in the clothes he had slept in. Tyler sat next to him. Chloe came in scrolling through her phone and set it face up beside her bowl. I asked Tyler about his week at school. He said it was fine. I asked what they had been learning. He looked at his father. Brett was already on his second bowl, without having acknowledged that a meal existed, let alone that someone had made it. Tyler shrugged and asked if we had any of those ranch chips. I said we did not. He said, "Can you get some tomorrow?" Not please, not could you, just the flat assumption that I would. I said I would see. Then Brett said, still looking at his phone, that the internet had been slow again and I should call Rogers and complain. I said I had already called twice this month. He said to call again, that we were paying for speeds we were not getting, as though the bill were a shared burden we both bore equally. I said, "Brett, I'm the one paying for the internet." There was a pause. Chloe looked up from her phone for the first time since she sat down. I said it calmly, not aggressively, just as a fact. The way you might note that it is raining outside. She put her phone down and said, "What is that supposed to mean?" I said it was not supposed to mean anything. I was just clarifying. She said, "You always do this. You make everything about money. It's exhausting, Dad. You act like you're doing us some huge favor just by existing." I looked at her. I thought about the chili on the stove, the groceries I had carried in from the car alone because no one offered to help, the Montessori tuition invoice I had paid that same morning, the $65 I had e-transferred to a storage facility for furniture they never used, the thermostat set to 23 degrees in February. I said, "I'm not trying to start anything, Chloe." She said, "Then don't. Nobody asked for your opinion, Dad. Just stay out of it." And that was it. That was the thing. Not the words themselves I had heard worse, but the way she said it. Bored, dismissive. Like I was a background noise that had gotten mildly irritating. Like I was a neighbor she had not bothered to learn the name of. I put my fork down. I got up from the table. Chloe said something behind me. I do not remember what. Brett said nothing. Tyler asked if he could be excused. I walked to the front hall. I took my jacket off the hook. I took my car keys from the bowl on the small table by the door. The bowl Chloe's mother had given me 25 years ago. The one I had kept through the marriage and the separation and every move since. I opened the front door. "Dad, where are you going?" I did not answer. "Dad, are you serious right now?" I closed the door behind me, got into my Civic, sat there for a moment in the dark and the cold. It was November Ottawa in November, which means the kind of cold that gets into your joints, and then I drove. I did not know where I was going. I ended up at a Tim Hortons on Ogilvy Road, sitting in the parking lot with a medium double-double, and I called my friend Arthur, who I have known since 1987, and I told him what had happened. Arthur said, "You already know what you need to do." I said I did. Here is what people do not understand about a decision like this. It is not made in a moment. The moment is just when you finally stop pretending you have not already made it. I had been making this decision for 2 years, every time I paid a bill that was not mine, every time I apologized for pointing out a fact. Every time I woke up at 6:30 in my own home and counted the hours until I would have a room to myself again. The drive home from Tim Hortons took 11 minutes. Chloe was on the couch when I came in. She did not look up. Brett had gone to bed. Tyler was asleep. The house was quiet in the way that houses are quiet when everyone inside is either absent or angry. I went to my bedroom. I got out my laptop. I spent 4 hours doing what I needed to do. I called my financial advisor the next morning. She had been telling me for 18 months to revisit my situation. And every time I had deflected. Now I told her what I needed. She did not say "I told you so," which is one of the reasons I have trusted her for 15 years. I called my bank directly and spoke to someone about the accounts I shared or had any link to. The joint account I had set up for household expenses, originally just for convenience. The way these things always start as something reasonable. I moved the funds and had it reclassified. The co-signature on their car loan I had a lawyer begin the process of addressing. It was not a quick process, but I began it. I removed Chloe from my Rogers account. She had been on my phone plan since university, which is 12 years if you are counting. Her monthly contribution to the plan was $0, which is what I was charging her. I called the Montessori school and notified them that the arrangement for Tyler's fees would be changing at the end of the current term. I felt something when I made that call. Not pride. Something more complicated. I want Tyler to have good things. I still want that. But there is a difference between a grandfather choosing to give a gift and a grandfather being assumed to pay because he has not yet refused. Then I called a real estate agent, not to sell, not yet, but to understand my options, to know what the house was worth now, to have the information in my hand so that I was never again surprised by my own life. That same week, I gave Brett and Chloe a formal notice of 60 days. I had a lawyer draft it. I could have just said it over dinner, but I had spent 2 years having conversations over dinner that dissolved into air, and I was done with that. Paper is harder to dismiss. Paper says, I mean this, I have thought about this. This is not a moment of irritation that will pass by morning. I slid it under their bedroom door on a Thursday evening while they were watching something on their laptop. I heard Chloe's voice through the door almost immediately. She said my name. Then she said it again louder. Then she came out into the hallway and she looked at me. She was holding the letter in both hands, and her expression was one I had not seen on her face since she was a child. Something had cracked open. She said, "You can't be serious." I said I was. She said, supposed to go. Tyler's in school here. Brett is. She stopped. She knew, I think, how that sentence was going to sound. You can't just kick us out, Dad. You're his grandfather. You're my father. I said, that's exactly right. I'm your father, and this is my house. And I need you to find your own home. She said I was being cruel. I thought about November. I thought about the thermostat at 23 degrees. I thought about ranch chips and an internet bill and groceries I carried in alone from the car. I said, I love you, Chloe. I love Tyler. That has not changed. But I cannot keep doing this, and I am not going to. She went back into the room. I heard her voice and then Brett's voice lower and then nothing. I went to my bedroom. I slept better than I had in months. The weeks that followed were not easy. I want to be honest about that too. There were mornings when I second-guessed myself. There were nights when Tyler would pad out to the kitchen while I was reading and climb up on the chair across from me and ask for water, and I would get it and sit with him for a few minutes in the quiet and think about what this transition was going to mean for him. That was hard. I am not going to pretend it was not. But I also watched in those 60 days a small and quiet miracle. Brett got a job. A real one. In distribution, I think, something with Loblaws out in Canada. He started early, got home tired, did not complain, or at least did not complain to me. I do not know if the letter did that. I do not know if he had finally run out of comfortable options, but something shifted. Chloe found an apartment in the East End. 2-bedroom, decent building, not far from a good public school for Tyler. She told me about it on a Saturday morning over coffee. Just the two of us, which had not happened in a long time, and her voice was different. Still a little hard around the edges maybe, but underneath that there was something else. Something that had not been there when everything was handed to her, and she had no reason to need it. She did not apologize that morning. Maybe she will someday, maybe not. I have stopped needing it to happen on a schedule. They moved out on a Thursday in January. I stood in the empty 3rd bedroom that afternoon. There was a mark on the wall where Tyler had hung something, a ghost of a picture hook, and a dent in the carpet where a dresser had sat. I stood there for a while. It was very quiet. Then I went to the kitchen, made myself a proper dinner for the first time in 2 years. Salmon, roasted potatoes, a glass of Pinot Noir that I did not have to justify to anyone, and I sat down at my dining room table. The one I had refinished with my own hands in 2009. I ate slowly. I looked out the window at the backyard, at the cedar hedge along the back fence that I had planted the year Chloe started high school. In February, I booked a train through the Rockies. The Canadian, from Toronto to Vancouver. 4 nights through the mountains. I had wanted to do it for 20 years and had always found a reason not to. I sat in the dome car somewhere west of Jasper and watched the peaks pass in the fading afternoon light, and I thought about all of it. The years and the choices and the love and the mistakes and the long, slow drift away from my own life that I had let happen because I was afraid that saying no would mean being unloved. I ordered a rye and ginger from the bar attendant. The mountains outside were enormous and completely indifferent and absolutely beautiful. I had my whole life still ahead of me, and for the first time in years it was mine.